our tribal government's still unaware.
Right.
You know, I think that's an inviting a fight. You know?
Well, and again, just to keep in mind though, you know, to reiterate again, you know, these questions are literally, you know, when Yale signed on as our, or was awarded the contract to be our strategic planning coordinator, and, you know, and he and Terry reviewed the manual, you know, this is really a list of the questions that he came up with, you know, to start off. And then when him and I, you know, Adam, when we talked about it and stuff, then it was at least a start off for questions, you know, that we distributed out with the manuals for you all to look at. And I totally, you know, understand. I mean, we understand that, you know, right, with, you know, the different tribes, the diversity within the tribes, even in, you know, in the 4-county area here and stuff. You know, yeah, there's not going to be necessarily, again, you know, like one wrapped up little booklet all tidy that's going to answer everybody's question and everybody's going to be able to go out and, you know, and offer ILC services to Native American people. But again, you know, I think, and I think this came up earlier too, but, you know, like with CFILC might be, you know, a good agency though to, and I believe this was somewhat mentioned earlier, but, you know, if there, again, was some funding available, but, you know, to do some training specifically for, again, like tribal representatives, you know, statewide at least, you know, bring them in or do them in both locations, but on, again, not only the cultural awareness part of it, but talking about ILCs, our independent living centers there, and doing the training, you know, doing the training to the potential partners or providers.
Has that been suggested to the SILP for the technical assistance money? Because they have money, this potential consumer group may not be on the state plan for independent living, but still there's funding, you know, the funding that comes in gets guided by that body to, and they put money into the powwow when we were first doing this, and that might be a really something that this body could propose back to the SILP to consider funding some technical assistance to tribal representatives and bring us into proximity so that we can talk about how do we affect it.
Right, exactly. Exactly so.
Yeah, you know, that's program, Tribal Vocational Rehabilitation Program managers belong to the KNAR, right? KNAR is a consortium of administrators, Native American. And we've developed, as an organization, we've developed a statement about IL services for Native people, right? And it's on the website. And so this is not just an issue for California; it's a national issue, and we're trying to figure out a way to make independent living services a reality in the country. So it's not just something. We're not grappling with this alone. It's out there, and so it's a challenge to us to come up with a viable plan that maybe the rest of the nation could do also. I just want to put that on.
We have some respectful thinking. This manual is not disrespectful in any way. You know, it's put together with great consideration, and the questions, they're probing questions, trying to find a better communication, better way to communicate. So I think that, you know, as David said, you know, we're on the road to being a role model for the United States, and I think that we all have a really good conscience, and we really are all trying to do the right thing, and I think that's, I don't think you can ask any more than that, as long as you all keep that in the forefront, that this is something that we're really trying to achieve a basis for communication. And where it's, needs to be diversified. I think one of the things that and that's partly our federal government's need to categorize all of us. Instead of each Asian population, they instead of saying Japanese and Chinese and Taiwan and so forth, they categorize everybody as Asian, and they do the same thing with the Latino population and American Indian population. So we are challenged to step again outside that box and be more cognizant of, no, especially our American Indian populations, they're nations within the nation. We have to be aware of that, respect it, and think how we can better communicate more respectfully.
Is there a requirement for diversity among ILCs?
Yes.
Yes.
Go there.
You can have it.
Oh, yes. Ben Harmel.
Yeah.
Ben
Yay,
Harmel.
Ben.
Yay, yeah. Ben Harmel and the diversity committee. I think it started before I came on, but in 2006, it was decided by Department of Rehabilitation that every ILC needed a diversity plan. And then it was implemented in 2007, so they wrote it for their 07-08 year. And now they're in the process, they're in the third year of the 3-year cycle. So next year, which the fiscal year, the reporting year changes, and so it'll be October 1st, 2011 will be the next 3-year plan. So in July, we had a couple of phone calls, webinars, where myself and a couple of resource specialists from DOR talked to the independent living centers about what the department was looking for in their diversity plan. So the idea, and just really brief, the idea is this, to look at the data of who you've been serving, right? If you're looking at the demographics of who you've been serving, and then you compare it against census data and other data that you might collect, because the census doesn't collect everything. And you look for the gaps, and you think, okay, if we have a high percentage of, let's say, Americans, and we're not serving them, then that's a gap that we need to address. And then this is specifically what we plan to do. And if you find, let's say, 4 or 5 populations where there are gaps, you may not have the capacity to do it all. But the shotgun approach usually doesn't work. So then you choose 1 or 2 populations to focus on over the next 3 years. So that's what the plan is, and we're still working it out, because I know it's been 3 or 4 years, but it still feels really new, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That's a real key element, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, as we've gone around the table, it's real clear that it's got to happen local.
Mhm.
And if the ILCs want to reach out to this population, they really need somebody within their own system that can reach out to the community. And so, in California at least, I know we've lost teeth on diversity over the years, because certain rules that used to exist no longer exist now. And so it's much more difficult to have, a hammer to say, you have to do this. And yet, I think it's going to be very difficult for us to outreach to this community, as it is with, for example, in our own DR communities. If we have an Asian counselor that speaks Cantonese, if that person goes away, we literally cut ourselves off from that population. I don't care how good, if I bring an interpreter in and I say, but I can give you the same thing, it won't happen. It just won't happen. I mean, you almost have to have someone who's local to make that connection with local. So I don't know if the manual can encourage that or whatever, but the diversity issue is going to be really important, I think. I've talked to myself to death about having a diversity manager even within DOR, because ever since Governor Wilson, that's not been, that piece of it has been lost to some degree. So I think that's going to be a real important thing in terms of getting the message across, is that we encourage that process. We stay on it all the time, and we don't let it slip out.
Mhm.
you know, if we've got the ball rolling.
Yeah, the independent living centers started a few years before, I think you did, looking because of the force of one of our members at the English-Spanish divide, and how not automatic it was when the population of Latinos or Hispanics or whatever, Mexicans or whatever you want to call that group, was emerging and growing in California. And from that, it went to, it was a conversation, sort of an off-the-record conversation with Ben. Would it be good if Department of Rehabilitation in their monitoring activities required a diversity plan from centers? And the rest is as Kim described it. But I think it comes from centers being aware that, you know, we started with white guys in wheelchairs, you know, in the late 60s, and we've been struggling to broaden and bridge the gaps ever since.
Well, one of the things about just service delivery, I'm just going to relate a little story. When I worked for my tribe, that was only for a short period because, you know, all my cousins were coming and demanding this and demanding that. So I decided to work for a neighboring tribe instead of my own tribe. That's a whole other story. But at one point the health director asked me to do a training for all of their doctors and nurses and this, that, and the other about how to deliver culturally appropriate services to our people. You know, and I thought about it. I said, yeah, I'll do it. I jumped at it, and I thought for a few weeks before I actually jumped off into this training. And all I could come up with was when Greg or Suzanne comes into our office for services, what do they want? And you know this, Jack. So they want services. They want somebody who knows what they're doing, not somebody that knows how to,
Talk to them.
you know, make you feel good just because, you know, whatever. But they want services. They want some real answers. They want to know how to fix that wheelchair or get the answers to their questions. That's all. So I gave them that day-long training just to say that. So I want to just keep that in mind too. You know. So like I said, I am talking out of both sides of my mouth.
Yeah, it's not all touchy-feely, it's, can you do the thing that?
Can you do the
Right,
work?
Yeah, right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Deliver the goods.
But don't you find, or maybe you don't find, one of the things that the other population that I think has been sort of attended to by, or maybe one of the other populations is people with mental health disabilities. And I know that we didn't see a huge inflow of people until I had a person who was well respected in that community who herself had a mental health disability. And there's some recognition on some very subtle level that this person gets me, that even if we don't share everything about everything, this person gets me, and if there's some way to go awry, they'll keep me from doing that. You know, I think it's that kind of connection that often when we hire someone who's out of the target group that we're trying to reach, that there is a validity to it that is more than just, can you give me the service? It's, can you give me the service in a way I'll understand it, in a way that meets my needs, and, you know.
Well, you're talking intuition. Intuitively know.
Yeah, yeah. Or experience with some sort of closed system that they've been up against.
So I think then, at this point then, I mean, and considering the discussion and, you know, I think it's actually at least a good starting point to start at least the strategic planning process. I mean, there's going to be this swoop, and there's a lot of steps, and we're obviously not going to get anywhere near, I mean, because there's a lot more work and discussion to be done though too, obviously.